It was just after midnight when Daniel Brooks heard the sound that would change his life forever. The single father had been walking his dog, Max, along the quiet stretch of back road that bordered the woods near his small rented home. He couldn't sleep that night, too many bills, too many worries about how he was going to provide for his 9-year-old daughter, Emily. The world had pressed down heavy on him, but the faithful bark of Max had pulled him outside into the cool night air. The moonlight spilled across the gravel, and Daniel tugged his worn jacket tighter around himself. Max sniffed the ground, pulling at the leash, tail wagging as though he had caught a scent. At first, Daniel thought it was just a rabbit or raccoon. But then, Max growled low, ears pricked, and bolted toward the ditch just off the road. Daniel, heart thudding, stumbled after him. And that's when he saw her. A figure slumped in the grass. A woman, her uniform torn, blood pooling beneath her. Her badge glinted in the pale light, a police officer. Her lips trembled as she tried to whisper something, but the words broke off into a gasp of pain. Dear God, Daniel knelt beside her. Stay with me, ma'am. Stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed but searching, as if she couldn't believe someone had found her. Daniel's mind raced. No phone signal out here. His truck was parked back at the house, a good 10-minute walk. She was bleeding fast. Every second counted. And then came the decision that would shock an entire police force, the decision that would rewrite the course of all their lives. Daniel was not a man of means, not a man the world would expect much from. His days were filled with long shifts at the construction site, his nights with homework help, macaroni dinners, and reading bedtime stories to Emily. Since his wife had left years ago, it had just been him, Emily, and Max against the world. He had never imagined that fate would place a dying officer in his path. Max, Daniel said hoarsely, pressing his hand against the officer's wound, stay. The dog whined but crouched, ready. The woman's name tag read Martinez. Her breathing was shallow, her voice barely audible. Suspect, ambush, she tried to lift her radio, but it was shattered. Daniel swallowed the panic rising in his throat. You're not dying on me, Officer Martinez. Not tonight. He tore off his jacket and pressed it hard against the bleeding wound on her abdomen. She winced, groaning, but he spoke firmly, like he would to Emily when she was scared. Look at me. You've survived worse days. You fought through worse nights. Just hold on. Max and I got you. But she was slipping. Her skin was growing pale, her breaths ragged. Daniel knew he had to act fast. He pulled the leash from Max's collar, tied it tightly above her wound like a makeshift tourniquet, and prayed it would slow the bleeding. Then, without thinking twice, he hoisted her up, the weight nearly knocking him off balance, and began the long walk back home. Max ran ahead, barking into the night as if calling out for help. Every step was agony. Daniel's muscles screamed, his arms burned, but he gritted his teeth. He thought of Emily asleep in her bed, thought of what it would mean if no one ever came to save her. He would not let this woman die. Not while he still had strength left in his body. By the time he staggered into his driveway, he was soaked in sweat and shaking. He kicked open the front door with his boot and lowered Officer Martinez gently onto the couch. Max barked furiously, circling them both. Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. Daddy? What's happening? Daniel's heart clenched. He forced a calm he didn't feel. Sweetheart, go get Daddy's phone. Hurry. She obeyed, her little footsteps pounding across the floor, returning with the old cracked phone. Daniel dialed 911, voice urgent as he explained, an officer down, bleeding heavily, unconscious. But the dispatcher's words cut like ice, nearest ambulance at least 20 minutes out. 20 minutes. She didn't have 20 minutes. Daniel pressed harder on the wound, whispering to Martinez. Stay with me. Please, stay. He had no training, no medical knowledge beyond what little he'd picked up from first aid posters at work. But he had determination. And sometimes, that was enough. Time blurred. Sirens finally pierced the night, growing louder, and Daniel nearly wept with relief when flashing red and blue lights filled his street. The medic stormed in, shocked to find the officer not already gone. "Who did this tourniquet?" one asked. Daniel, hands bloodied, raised his shaking arm. I did what I could." The medic's eyes widened. "You saved her life. Without this, she'd be gone." But Daniel barely processed the words. All he saw was Emily clutching Max in the corner, eyes wide with both fear and pride. As they carried Officer Martinez out, she stirred just enough to whisper, "Thank you." The next days were a blur. Daniel thought the story would end there, that the officer would recover quietly, that life would slip back into its hard, ordinary rhythm. But he was wrong. The police force descended on his little neighborhood. Squad cars lined the street. Officers in uniform knocked on his door, one after another, to shake his hand, to hug his daughter, to kneel and scratch Max's ears. "Sir," said the police chief one morning, his voice thick with emotion, "your bravery saved one of our own. We'll never forget what you and your dog did that night." Daniel tried to brush it off. "I just did what anyone would." But deep down, he knew the truth, not everyone would have. The days turned into weeks. Officer Martinez recovered, slower than she wanted, but alive. When she was strong enough, she visited Daniel and Emily in person. Emily had baked cookies, and Max barked joyfully as she entered. Martinez knelt down, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "You don't know me, Daniel. But I know now that if you hadn't found me, my son would be motherless. My family would be broken. You gave me back my life." Daniel swallowed hard, unable to speak. Martinez smiled at Emily. "And you've got a daddy who's braver than any man I know." It was then Daniel realized something profound. For years he had felt like a failure, a man barely scraping by, a father who could never give his daughter the world. But in that moment, he saw himself through their eyes, not a man who lacked, but a man who gave everything. And that, he realized, was enough. Months later, the police force held a ceremony. Daniel didn't want to go, but Martinez insisted. "This isn't about glory. It's about showing my brothers and sisters in uniform that hope sometimes comes from the unlikeliest places." The hall was filled with officers, families, reporters. Daniel stood awkwardly in the corner, Emily clutching his hand, Max sitting obediently by his side. Then the chief called his name. "Daniel Brooks, single father, construction worker, and hero. You and your dog did what even trained professionals might have failed to do. You acted not out of duty, but out of compassion. And for that, you have our eternal gratitude." The applause was thunderous. Emily beamed with pride, tears shining in her little eyes. Daniel felt his throat tighten, emotion flooding through him. When Martinez pinned a small medal onto his jacket, she whispered, "You may not wear a badge, Daniel, but tonight, you're one of us." The world outside the hall may never know the full weight of that night, but those who were there would never forget. A single dad, weighed down by life's struggles, had given everything he had, not because he was asked to, not because he had to, but because humanity demanded it. And in doing so, he reminded an entire city, and himself, that even in the darkest moments, ordinary people could shine with extraordinary light. As Daniel walked out into the cool evening air, Emily tugged his hand and whispered, "Daddy, you're my hero." For the first time in years, Daniel smiled without doubt or fear. Maybe life was still hard. Maybe the bills would keep coming. But tonight, he carried something stronger than worry. He carried hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to change everything.